Welcome to today's EDUCAUSE webinar, Aligning IT and Enrollment Goals and Priorities, our fourth and final session of our Transforming Leadership series with Vantage Consulting Group. My name is Jason Martin. I'm a Learning Programs Manager at EDUCAUSE, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. EDUCAUSE is pleased to welcome today's panelists. They'll introduce themselves in just a moment, but first let me give you a brief orientation on our session's meeting environment. We hope you'll join us in making our session interactive. To do so, open the chat by clicking on the chat icon at the bottom of the presentation window. You can use the chat throughout the webinar to make comments, share resources, and to post questions for our presenters. When you do so, please be sure to select everyone from the chat drop-down menu so you can engage with all participants. We will have a Q&A at the end of the presentation, but we encourage you to type your questions into the chat throughout the webinar. If you have any technical issues, you can please send me a private message by selecting panelists in the chat dropdown. And as always, the session recording and slides will be archived later today on the registration page website. Also, if you're using social media, please feel free to use the hashtag #EDUCAUSEwebinar. Finally, the content for this webinar was developed by Vantage Technology Consulting Group, an EDUCAUSE strategic partner. EDUCAUSE is working closely with Vantage this year to strengthen the collaboration between private industry and higher education institutions and evolve the higher education technology market. Please be on the lookout for other opportunities to connect with Vantage throughout the year, which we'll talk about some of them later today. With that, I just want to remind you all that we have a poll launched that you can please open if you're entering the room and just joining us. And there's a question there in the poll. And other than that, thank you for joining us, and I'll hand things over to you, Kathy.
All right, thank you very much. Well, we're so excited to be able to spend some time with you today. You might notice that we're missing one participant, so let me talk about that first. Jackie Bailey, who is the CIO at the Minnesota State System, was part of our group and has contributed greatly to the development of this conversation, but she found herself double booked, which happens to us sometimes as CIOs. So she's at another conference presenting as we speak. But she has given us some great talking points. And so Kirk and I are going to channel Jackie as we go through our conversation today. So let me start just by doing introductions here. Rajmi, how about if we do you first?
Sounds great. It's great to be here. Welcome, everyone. My name is Rashmi Radhakrishnan. I'm the Vice President for Enrollment Management, Information Technology and Innovation, and also the Chief Information Officer at Arcadia University. I'm looking
As you
forward
can
to the
see,
discussion.
yeah, as you can see, Rajmi has a lot of credentials and expertise to bring to this conversation. So we're so excited that she's here with us today. Kirk, go ahead.
Hey everybody, I'm Kirk Kelly. I'm a vice president here at Vantage. I know I've seen a lot of names in the attendee list who I know, but I was in higher education IT for over 35 years, CIO at a couple institutions. Some of you might remember me. I was the CIO at Portland State University and worked very closely with our enrollment management area. And have a number of things to contribute today, and I will also be channeling some of Jackie's input. So it's a pleasure to be with you all.
All right. And finally, I'm Kathy Bates. I've been at Vantage for about 8 years. Prior to that, in higher ed for about 32 years. Also had the pleasure of working very closely with enrollment management on a lot of initiatives and data. So just think this is a wonderful space for us to be in and a really important conversation. We do have a poll going. I hope that you're all taking a minute to just put in your spot of where you think you are in terms of your understanding of enrollment management practices. Jason, can you tell us how we're doing on that poll?
Yeah, pretty good. Maybe just a couple seconds. I think we have a large amount of folks, so just a couple more seconds, and I think let's close it out.
Okay, very good.
I'm very curious to see the response to that.
Me too. I think this is a great conversation, and I think that there's so much room and opportunity to develop and deepen the partnership between IT and enrollment management. So no matter where you land on this scale, I really feel like you're going to get a lot out of this conversation, and we're going to, really try to provide you a lot of opportunities to contribute to it along the way. So you'll find that we're asking you to contribute to the chat as we go as well.
Kathy, looking back, I think we could have added one more thing. Choice 6, curious.
Yes. That's a good one.
And it looks like we're slowing down. So shall I go ahead and end the poll and share the results?
Yes, please.
Sounds good.
there you are. There are the results for everyone to see.
Oh, this is great. All right. I'm loving seeing that there's as many in the moderate as there is. That is pretty good. Um, I can understand that there are folks that have a lot to learn about enrollment management and want to really work on deepening that relationship. That's part of what we want to spend some time doing today. So, Kirk, what do you think about this?
I think it's great. We couldn't respond because I was thinking Rushmi might have marked the expert one, so we would have had somebody land in that area.
No, I put myself clearly in the curious category.
This is great, and when we're seeing a fairly even distribution, so we've got a good audience here today. Looks like we're up to about 60 folks, so this should be a good conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm looking
that is
forward to
excellent.
it.
Okay, great. All right, well, I'm going to start with our first question that we want to spend a little bit of time on. And we want to think about this from the point of view of maybe starting from the CIOs. So, from CIOs or from the technology perspective, what do we need to know about enrollment management and their strategic objectives? I'm going to ask Rajmi this, and then Kirk, I think you're going to jump in and channel some of Jackie's talking points that are around this. And Rajmi too, like, can you talk a little bit about some of the innovative things that you're doing in Arcadia? Because you are doing some very innovative things.
Sure. First, I'll answer your first question. I think one of the things that when I was just in IT, that I think it is hard to actually imagine sometimes the pressure the enrollment management teams are under. Especially if you're in a tuition-driven institution, what a lot of institutions are, there's enormous amounts of pressure, and that sort of cascades down to whoever they are interacting with, depending on what time of the year they are having those interactions. I got to see that from both sides, from being on the technology side and now being on the enrollment management side. So I think that's one thing to always understand is to, first of all, as a CIO, I'd be make myself very familiar with the goals. What is your enrollment goal? What's your net revenue goal? How's net revenue calculated? There's some basic, clear things, but once having that understanding is going to be very important. That was very helpful for me to understand what the team was trying to accomplish because they were tied so closely to the institutional priorities and goals.
Yeah,
What was your second question?
Oh, let's talk a little bit about the initiatives that you're doing at Arcadia.
So Arcadia University, we have it's got an interesting few things happening. At Arcadia University, we have a whole study abroad component where we actually white label study abroad programs for various institutions. We also have graduate and we have undergraduate programs. But what we recently have been talking about, because we attract a lot of first-gen students, is how do we make sure that we have programs that are really market aligned? So a lot of our conversations now revolve around certifications, stacked programming, so workforce development, upskilling. I think there are a lot of, even though it may seem like at the very beginning, it has very little to do with the traditional enrollment, it does. Because the way that these certifications actually help with the graduates' marketability is incredibly important, and it makes them more ready. But also, for the first time, we don't have a continuing ed department. So we are now starting with our online programs for undergraduate. We've always had graduate programs. So those are some of the very exciting things that we're doing at Arcadia. Seems like we're doing everything at the same time, though.
Indeed.
And I'll jump in. I should say that when Jackie figured out she couldn't be here, she made a long list of notes and said, "This is what I would have said." So we're going to do a little bit of that today, and then, as I mentioned before, Kathy and I have our own personal experiences that will drop in. And so one of the things that she felt was important to mention for IT to know is that enrollment management involves many systems. I think we know that, but as you can think about the process and the systems that they use from the CRM to the student information system, to your LMS, to maybe some AI-oriented chatbot, to financial aid, communications platforms. And when they do that, they're trying to create this seamless experience for the students, and often it isn't much, right? Because we've cobbled these things together and it appears that way. And so it seemed important from her perspective that IT has that lens and that IT helps to make that process as seamless as possible. So it doesn't look like there's a jarring experience from now you've done this and now you've done that. The other thing that's important to note is that because there's so much focus on enrollment for our institutions, and that's going to continue, we've got the 2026 decline that a lot of people have kind of seen, and of course that was affected by COVID. But there's this heightened pressure, and Rashmi said that early on. There's a lot of pressure on enrollment management right now, and they've got, and what they don't want to do is to lose students in this process, because it appears that the systems or the infrastructure is kludged together. So they start in the process and they think maybe I'll go somewhere else, or maybe they've had a seamless experience somewhere else, and then they come to your institution and get halfway through the process and think this is I'm not going to continue. And so it's really important for IT to help make that as seamless as possible, and to come over and join the enrollment management side. One of the other things was also just a general understanding of the funnel and what the funnel looks like and how early the funnel starts, and then what melt looks like. And we just talked about a possible opportunity for melt where maybe somebody started in the process and then went away, because the experience wasn't seamless and it wasn't what they were expecting. And this goes without saying, but the world that our students deal with is becoming more and more seamless, whatever that experience happens to be. And they want to come to an institution that at least appears to be within the last 10 years. Let's put it that way. I think there's probably some grace that they'll extend, but it's not forever. So I think I've channeled the things that she said. Anything else, Rashmi, on this one? Because I've got a question coming up here.
No, those are excellent points. And I would also add that let's not forget onboarding, because a lot of students experiences the enrollment management process, the recruitment process could be seamless, but then they start the onboarding and it is like a whiplash, and it's almost like going through your sales, handing you over to the actual vendor.
Yeah, that's a good point. Or they go through that whole process and it's seamless, and then they go to register for classes. And like,
exactly. And
right.
also adding social media to this, because everything that we do or don't do lives on social media forever. So that reputational impact is huge, multiplied.
Great point. All right, so I'm going to ask a question 2 here that we've got geared up is why is the partnership between IT and enrollment management important? And then how have you helped both sides and their representatives in making the partnership successful? I'll start with you, Rashmi.
So if you are a tuition-driven institution, there are maybe two. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
There are probably 2 or 3 revenue streams most institutions rely on. The enrollment management, whatever they do, is directly related to the financial or the fiscal health of the institution. And especially now that there is a demographic cliff and a lot of institutions are competing for the same students, that becomes even more important. One of the things that we may not often talk about is once you have an institution of a certain size, there are certain overheads or expenses that are just consistent, whether you're bringing in the students or not. This puts enormous pressure on the fiscal viability of the institution itself. I'm in the Northeast, and just around me, there are about 4 to 5 institutions that have already closed. So that's one of the reasons where I think the board and the president are putting enormous pressure on the enrollment management leadership. And they are looking for their teams to actually execute on strategy. And when the strategy execution is where things fail or delay, that's where the tension starts between IT and enrollment management. From my perspective, I do actually try to align with the business priorities of the institution. Recruitment and retention are two of our highest priorities. So we look at initiatives, even as part of our digital transformation efforts, as to what are the things that directly impact the goals of those areas. So from an IT side, we started the implementation of a Salesforce CRM a few years ago. We invested in a data warehouse and data analytics. We also invested in the last few years in a lot of things that have to do with business process automation and just creating bandwidth. What we have seen over the last 2 years is a huge increase in our applicant number, and we have changed our paradigm, our operating system, in terms of wanting to do more relational work and less of the system work. So IT is taking up more of the burden of doing the system work, sort of acting the part of the enabler for the strategy to work on. And of course, that causes some stress. It's not that, as a CIO, somebody's giving me a big pot of money and say, go hire 3 people and make this easy. That's really the tension, is you are making this happen with the resources that you have. So I think that's where inviting IT to the table, so IT understands why we are doing something and not just say, hey, can you go help me do that? That, I think, is where I think enrollment management can do better.
That's great. Thoughts, Kathy?
Yeah. So, one of the things that Jackie mentioned when we were talking is just how important this conversation is between enrollment management and IT and how to build that partnership. And I think one of the things that she really talked about was it really has to be a partnership. It's not just IT supporting enrollment management, but it's IT understanding the goals of enrollment management, understanding the goals of the institution, and figuring out how to achieve those goals together. And so I think that takes a lot more conversation, a lot more understanding from IT to bring to that partnership in order to get to that new spot together, right? And I think that's what a lot of what Rajmi and Jackie have talked with us about is really having to be in a new place in terms of the depth and the expanse really of that partnership, because it's both, it's depth and expanse. There's so much that's involved in the funnel, so much that's involved with all of these technologies. And then you just add in AI and where it's all going. It's really, it's an amazing opportunity, right? As CIOs, we're always looking for opportunities. That's definitely one. And I think, it also sort of shows that we don't want to be in a reactive mode in this particular case for the institution, because we can't afford it. We can't afford to be in a reactive mode. We have to be anticipating where things are going. And we have to be thinking about the fact that the pace of change in enrollment management it's really accelerated. I mean, they're really sort of on the forefront. And Rajmi has talked a little bit about this in the past as well. And Rajmi, if you want to jump in and say something about that as well, I think that's a really important point for the CIOs and the technologists to know, is that the pace of change that's happening out here is enormous. And being ahead of that is really difficult. And if you're not in a partnership, almost impossible.
As you were talking, Kathy, what's interesting is as I stepped into the enrollment management roles, you can really see how the rest of the campus are focused on. If you're a traditional school institution, you're looking at 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, and older. But when you are in enrollment management, you're really dealing with sophomores, juniors, and seniors. We are already anticipating how they're using technology. So one of the things that we are right now talking about, I'd be curious to see what the audience participants here think about, is how are students searching for institutions that has fundamentally changed. They're not going to Google and searching for your institution. They're asking ChatGPT. They're asking Gemini. They're asking whatever generative tool there. So the question is, from a technology side, how ready are you as an institution? How ready is your website? How ready is your data to be able to respond to that? And I think that's some of the tensions there too, because we, from enrollment management standpoint, have to be ready almost 2 years ahead of where the rest of the student population is in terms of its digital knowledge. So it's going to be very interesting. It's already very interesting.
So one of the things also that we talked about in this was really how do both sides come together to approach that partnership? And we talked a little bit about how important it is to respect what both sides bring to the table as part of that, right? So I think understanding, Rajma, you talked about understanding the funnel as being one of the most important things that IT can do as they come to the table. What is it that enrollment management needs to think about from the CIO perspective and what they're bringing to it, for instance.
So I saw from the poll that not everybody has a lot of experience with enrollment management. So I'll take 1 minute, 1 second or 2 seconds to talk about what a funnel is.
That's great.
The funnel is really different cultivation stages from the time when somebody shows any interest in your institution all the way to them paying a deposit and then matriculating, eventually becoming your student. So think of it as this big funnel. At the top of the funnel is all your leads, essentially. Then they say, hey, I'm interested in your institution. That becomes an inquiry. And then they say, I think I'm going to apply to your institution. That's the applied. And then they get admitted or not. That's your decision pool there. And then a portion of them do deposit, and then there's melt, as Kirk said, and then as of census, or however your institution captures it, is your actual matriculation. So that's really the funnel. As a CIO, it'll be great to CIO or any technology leader. And I just don't want to say just CIOs, because a lot of times it is the director of enterprise applications or the AVPs who are having these really strategic conversations. And I think something to remember is to ask them questions that enrollment management doesn't think of asking. So, for example, we would hear enrollment management say, we just signed a partnership with X or Y because that's a new source of student data for us. They won't use the word data. They would just say inquiries. And I think as a technology partner, we sit here and say, oh, okay, what is that data? Is that data coming into the institution? Do we have to talk about integration? What is your timeline? Because the enrollment management is asked to pivot really, really fast. So they don't have this 12-month runway all the time. So, that's where IT has we have this nice, plan for the next 12 months. We know things happen, but what enrollment management brings to the table sometimes can be pretty big in scale. And that's one of the reasons why these ongoing conversations are good. So there are less assumptions on the enrollment management side and less surprises on the IT side.
You're talking about this earlier. One of the things I was thinking about is the IT, we typically do projects. They're typically not quick, so we might do a project. It might be a multi-month, could be a year, could be 18 months, 24 months, whatever it happens to be. And the one thing that we have in common with enrollment management is that lead time, that funnel process can be pretty long. And I remember when I was getting to know the enrollment management side much better, they were saying, we're 18 to 24 months out. Like the students you're seeing now, we started 24 months ago. And so from a systems perspective, their alignment is much closer to IT. Like it's going to take a bit to get there. So let's make this happen. The other thing I was thinking about working together, a lot of this is meeting in the middle. One of the things that Jackie said in the prep is, we need to change the conversation from transactional to more of a systems approach. Let's get away from we need to implement this technology, which IT people are going to like to hear, to how can we help you solve your problem.
Exactly.
And get to the core issue. The other thing I was thinking about is because there's so much pressure. Typically in IT, what we want to do is we want to change one thing and see what the outcome is. We want to change one thing and we want to see what the outcome is. Well, in enrollment management, if your lead time is 18 to 24 months, you don't have enough time to test this one thing, see what the outcome is, test this one. The next thing you know, you're a decade out. And so what enrollment management is likely to do is to pull 10 levers at once.
That's right.
Which systems IT people aren't going to like at all. But we've got to get our head into they have to pull all these levers at the same time. So how can we help them do that?
Yeah, sorry, Kurt.
No, go for it.
I said wearing two hats sometimes is the headache is I get to hear from both sides, right? So from the enrollment management side, it's like, oh my gosh, we absolutely have to do it. And IT said they don't have the time to do it. And then, you want us to do this. And on the IT side, they came to us at the last minute. And, how are we going to make this happen? I already have 5 things prioritized. It's a dance. And it's just being open to saying, okay, how do we prioritize that? There may be people who are deprioritized at some point, but that conversation should come to the leadership. So there are things that have to be elevated to the leadership, that the president's cabinet or whatever that might be. Because some of these decisions are huge. and say, okay, we're just going to have to do this, but that means X, Y, and Z may not happen on time. So.
Seen a couple questions come in here on the chat, and so encourage all of you, please. We've seen a couple come in. Maybe we can take a look at a couple of those. But Arena said, how much time is spent addressing non-traditional, non-degree courses, certification, registration? Those are not always smooth. Rashmi, I was going to kind of point that at you. What do you think?
Yeah, we are at the very beginning of it, but I think this is one of the areas where IT can be so helpful, right? So let's say that you have a non-traditional model that you are starting. They have a very different approach to everything from registration to recruitment to how you engage the students, student advising. It is so different. So I will give you an example. Very recently, we had a conversation at my institution about how many intakes do we have for new students. And if an IT person is not at the table, it becomes a very philosophical conversation. But if an IT person is at the table, this really becomes, how are our terms and semesters set up in our student information system? How is that going to affect the billing table? What does that mean for self-service of any kind that you have? That's the level of conversations that needs to happen. So I've been at institutions where this was done without IT, and it was a mess for years to come because you just carry the legacy, whatever mess was created, if it's not set up correctly. In terms of just how I have seen this best done, is to look at your overall institutional capacity, organizational capacity, and say, okay, this is how we do our work. How much of these functions can actually take on? So if we are doing student advising twice a year, is that enough to do advising? I'm not advising, academic standing twice a year. Is that enough to do academic advising twice a year for your new traditional students? So if you're not building a whole new infrastructure, I would always suggest make it simple. Make sure that whoever is implementing this has IT as part of their project team. And that person from IT knows to ask questions and can push back. Just having an IT representative who's sitting there saying they'll tell me when something needs to be done is not going to be helpful for anyone. So you need to have the right representation there. I don't know if I answered that question. The security and accessibility.
Yeah, that's
like
the
I said,
next
we
one.
are at the very beginning of this process. So we are actually creating very separate swim lanes for these students. They're mostly online students. They will have very minimal access to a lot of our resources or the resources that they need. So they'll have access to the library, but they may not have access to come to our labs. So we are definitely segregating them into their own swim lane.
All
Great.
right.
And again, go ahead, Kathy.
All right, I'm going to move us on to our next question. We want to talk about how to get these teams working well together, how they can best work well together. So Rashmi, what are some of your thoughts on that? And also, for those of you who are in the webinar with us, if you have some success stories or some challenges about working well together, we'd love to see those land in the chat.
Yeah. I've always found that there are opportunities for sort of formalizing these partnerships. I'm a big fan of a hub and spoke model. As much as my background is IT, I've always believed that the business expertise or the functional expertise lies with the functional areas. So sometimes having the functional expert as a shared role, I've always found that to be very helpful. That allows you to do a couple of different things, is to sort of elevate the access to this person, give them more of the technology training, allow them to be a little bit more independent, but also sets that bridge. Because the best business analysts are those who can anticipate business needs. And you cannot anticipate business needs unless you are part of that business operation. So, for me, it's always been about, Kirk, I think it was you who said, what are you trying to accomplish? It's very little about what do you want us to do. is about what do you want to accomplish, and then saying, okay, who is the business owner or the functional lead from your area, and then who is the lead from the IT space. And it is very important to have an executive sponsor. I can't stress that enough. If you're taking on any large projects, especially with enrollment management, make sure there's an executive sponsor for that, or a sponsor, period. There needs to be some way to elevate issues, because they will happen.
Yeah, Rashmi, as you were talking, I was just thinking, some of this, people aren't going to want to hear it, but it is about FaceTime. And you talk about being embedded, but it's also, if it's
That's right.
just written communications going back and forth between the areas, they're easy to be misinterpreted. And if there's a human element and a connection and back, I mean, it depends on the campus. I mean, some campuses still have that opportunity to go to lunch or do those kind of things, but getting those human tie-ins between the areas really helps create some trust. Because often there's a trust breakdown between the two specific areas, and written communication is not the best tool to solve the trust breakdown. In fact, it really does. And so I've thinking about getting the folks together if you can. And if you're remote, it's a different situation. You can still do it digitally, like we are right here. But that really does help. And then, one of the things that Jackie said when we were preparing for this is, how does this decision improve the student journey? Because everybody wants the student's journey to be better. You've got a common goal and you've got a common purpose, and making sure that as leaders, we talk about that common goal and that common purpose, I think, is really helpful.
Right. Kirk, we did a axe throwing with IT and enrollment management team together, and we organized for lunch. It was fun. I think that's the other thing, is just to not take ourselves too seriously sometimes. But I think that's such a good point.
Was there a competition between the two? Was anybody better at the
No, I would not
answering?
allow that. That's just that's counterproductive.
Smart.
That's a good point, Erna. That's
Yeah, Irina put a note in here. I think email's a good tool to maybe state something or provide some documentation. But if email becomes the discussion tool and you start to see emails go back and forth, it fails miserably at that.
Yeah, definitely. The bridging really seems like such an important part of this. And if you don't have a method for being able to do that, it might be your first and best place to start in terms of really building this partnership, figuring out how to get people together, and signaling how important it is to create that partnership as part of all of this. I think one of the things that we talked about when we were preparing for this webinar is just the importance of the model of an integrated CIO. And, we have a podcast at EDUCAUSE for the integrated CIO. And if all of you who who are listening in on this haven't had a chance to go to that podcast, I highly, highly recommend it. But I think the thing that we're thinking about there is that you really have to know the business of the academy. You have to know what is happening across the academy. You're there to help the academy succeed, and you can't do that very well if you don't really understand what's happening in all of those places. So I think that that's part of what you're trying to say, Rajmi, essentially, is you really need to become that kind of a leader. It isn't transactional, it really is partnership. Partnership is understanding each other's needs as part of all of that, and really becoming familiar with the business processes. The other thing I will add into that too, and remember this from talking, things that IT brings to this that I think sometimes we undersell ourselves on. We have a great understanding of the business processes at the institution because we're kind of familiar with the technology that's used to enable all of them. It also makes us pretty good at business process. And sometimes that can be a real help, is to come into the conversation to help with streamlining business processes, and to provide that kind of level of partnership for enrollment management, helping with the business process and helping with, data and things like that, to be able to really move forward, because both of those are so crucial really for AI, right? In some of the things that you're doing, Rajni.
Yeah, and it also builds trust. If IT comes to the table with that mindset about business process and data, it already is a one step towards building that relationship. No question about it. What are your pain points is one of the questions that actually accelerates these relationship building. And with setting the right expectation that we can't fix all the pain points all at the same time, but engaging them in that conversation is really helpful. I'm still surprised till even today. I learned of something. I was like, wow, okay. But the whole business process review is incredibly important, and it is an ongoing process. I think, Kathy, you're absolutely right. As technologists, we have a very different mindset. We are always looking for solutions, and enrollment management desperately needs that. And I find it sort of unfortunate that people are sort of forced to be in their own lanes, so to speak. I think enrollment management and IT are very aligned to work together in terms of what we need to do and how we operate. So I think the energies are aligned between IT and enrollment management. At least that's been my experience. It is when the leadership and the communication between the teams are not the best is when all these breakdowns happen. But it's
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say I had one more thought on this area, and this is something we talked about and Jackie mentioned also, is that this work is never done. So there's not a IT enrollment management project and then IT goes on to another project. I think this engagement with enrollment management is a constantly iterating thing because the world of IT and enrollment management is changing quickly. And I can't imagine there's a scenario where there's not where anybody's going to let off I would say gas, but some of us have electric cars. The accelerator pedal has that. On the enrollment management side, I mean, I think the pressure is going to continue to come, and if it's not coming from university leadership, it's going to come from the board. Like it's not going to stop. So that engagement, that continued engagement, that continued, it's almost like this rolling. We've got this project, we have this project. We're going to keep doing those things. So I think that's really important. So, Rashmi, the next question is, why does putting IT and enrollment management together in a leadership portfolio makes sense? I mean, we've talked about a number of the things. I've heard you actually say a couple of things, which I can already see the value to what's part of your portfolio. But what's your perspective? Why does putting this together? And maybe sometimes Jackie's not here, but marketing. I mean, there's just all kinds of things to think about.
Yeah, I think we underestimate how much the current enrollment management strategy actually relies on technology, especially with data and AI. What I found interesting is taking on enrollment management. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying that I did not feel that there was a huge gap in terms of strategically. We were working on a lot of these strategies for enrollment management. And then being in enrollment management, the alignment was incredible. If anything, that really strengthened the relationship, obviously, between IT and enrollment. But I think a CIO can also influence leadership to think about enrollment management differently. I think a CIO in this role can help modernize some of these operations, which the operations itself need to be modernized in many cases, which is what we had to do. And that is something I think most technologists are pretty good at. We can come in and we can look at something and say, okay, how do we modernize this? Not for today, but what's probably coming 2 years from now. So having that futurist kind of mindset really helps. For me, it is my passion for data. I'm a data nerd. For me, I still fight with my team for the SQL access. I was very much involved in building the data, warehouse. I look at all the data that we are all sitting on and how important that is for recruitment and retention. And I think a fraction of that is really being used in an actionable and a real-time basis. That's where I was able to make the biggest impact in a short amount of time, is leveraging what we already have. And just making sure that that is communicated. The communication and data were important. And also the service aspect that IT brings to the table is we cannot underestimate that. We are, if you're very client service minded, you actually look at all the people who come to your help desk as customers. And that's how we really need to be looking at our prospective students and their families. And that is actually all the things where I feel, coming from a service unit, having that data mindset and having that curiosity and that need and the ability to analyze and have that systems thinking, all those things are very important for enrollment management.
That's great. Yeah, as a CIO I was a data nerd, data geek, and I will say that the
That's why I
funnel.
like you, Kirk.
That's but I would say that funnel and the process and where you might lose people off the side of the funnel and how that kind of happens along the way. I just found that fascinating.
Yeah.
And especially to back it up and then try to figure out, okay, there's a point where we could do some business process analysis maybe and solve that issue. Like they're stopping out. And why is that? And try to drive towards it. There's a lot of systems discussion and conversation there.
You know, I'm remembering, Rajmi, when we got to help you with data governance at Arcadia. It's been quite a few years since we had that project with you, but it really started you on the process of making sure that your data was ready for where you are today. And you've always talked about how important data is as part of all of this. Between the data and getting the business processes right, you know, your investment has like put you in such a great spot for where you're trying to go with AI right now, which I think is just huge and probably something that I think maybe you could even talk about just a little bit more, because I bet people are really curious about AI and enrollment management now. It feels like enrollment management may be leading the institution in terms of
I
the
agree.
operational use of AI. So I don't know. What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
I actually agree. We use the AI more in enrollment management than any other area on our campus because there are so many use cases for it readily available within enrollment management. I'm also leading the marketing team at Arcadia, which is now part of enrollment management. When you look at marketing, especially as part of the recruitment marketing, it's impossible not to use technology, data, and AI at this point if you want to be effective with the resources you're spending. So when you look at what students or prospective students respond to, it is this hyper-personalized, very, I know who you are, right? And I think that and the responsiveness, all those things are, I mean, we are changing our chatbot to a generative AI chatbot, which we've been training for over a year now. And the reason is that prospective students can easily differentiate between a regular chatbot and a chatbot that is more like what they are used to in terms of, ChatGPT and others. So yeah, I think that's going to be pretty interesting to see where that happens. We also use that for a lot of our marketing and engagement from an enrollment management perspective. And if you are the way to leverage it is what comes back. For me, what's fascinating is as these AI models keep learning about you. So it knows Kathy opens an email at 5 a.m. Well, not usually, but you know what I mean. Like at the
Night at 12:30 a.m., but
yeah, 12:30 a.m. or 2 a.m., then it knows to time the email. If you're responding to a certain tone, it knows to do that. It's also, okay, somebody landed on your website. What are the tasks that are automated? The more we can build these sophistications using technology, the more time you have to actually pick up the phone or have a conversation or have an event on campus and do what enrollment management does best. So we use extensively in marketing enrollment management. We are implementing something now for our transcripts because we have so many applications and as you know, transcripts, the GPAs are all over the place. Somebody has 5-point scale, somebody has a 4-point scale. So we are now implementing a new tool that'll take all that, recalculate the GPA for us, saving us so much time and money. So yeah, It's answering phone calls, making phone calls, sending emails, creating campaigns. So yeah, it's like
It's
having
great.
additional bandwidth for you.
It is. Yeah, we're going to see a lot coming up here. So we did have another question from Sandra, and this comes from the academic side of the house. And the question was really, the lead time on enrollment management is 18, 24 months. The lead time on new curriculum is the same kind of thing. Those are long processes, as we know. So what do we, enrollment management IT, want to know from, or should we know from the academic side of the house? And I was just going to chime in and say, as a former CIO, I've been doing this work at Vantage for 4 years. And while I had done a few focus groups in my career as an IT person and a CIO, I've done almost 200 now in my role, because often our engagements when we show up on a campus, if we're doing strategic planning or helping with governance, or a lot of our other engagements involve a number of focus groups and listening sessions across campus. And that's one of the questions that we typically will ask is, where are you headed in 12 to 18 to 24 or 36 months? And then it's kind of this Wayne Gretzky thing of, how can IT skate to where the puck is going to be if that's the department that we're working with. And I remember doing this on a campus, and one of the areas said, we're actually redoing all of our curriculum. And we're going to we're going to kind of this hybrid approach. It's going to be more online and all these different things. And what we're going to do in the classroom is going to be different. And when we came back to IT with that message, nobody knew. Like, oh my gosh, they're going to do that. There's
Yeah.
things we should be doing right now. So that's one of the, so I'd say a couple things, Sandra, to answer your question. One, becoming IT doesn't just want to know, enrollment management doesn't just want to know about the technical things or the things 6 months in front of them. Like, coming with those long-term plans is really helpful. And then I think if you're enrollment management IT, you want to be asking those questions across your campus. Where is the campus going? What is the curriculum going to look like? Because I'm, not just IT from a systems perspective, but on the enrollment management side, that might be opening new doors for prospective students. But you might be looking at a whole different set of prospects based upon that curriculum change that you weren't before.
Spot on. That's exactly where we are. I would also say that there is actually usually some tension between enrollment management and the academic side of the institution. And for good reason. There is this push and pull. Where are my new programs? Is it market aligned to faculty saying, hey, where are the resources? We need bandwidth to innovate. One of the things I found I have contribute to our success is the faculty partnership. And I mean partnership as in from thought partnership. We have an enrollment council that is actually led by enrollment management and actually the faculty chair at this time, Senate chair. So having those relationships, asking questions and engaging them in these innovations. Actually, we are enrollment management. We have a small team. We actually lead some of these conversations about academic innovation. We bring data to the table. We talk about where the market is, where the, what students are graduating in, sort of bring that part of the conversation and engage faculty in, what do you need? What is it that we can do? And that's been really helpful. But you need a very close partnership with your faculty to do that.
It's a great idea, though. Absolutely great idea. I'm looking at time, and I know we'll need to turn this back over to Jason soon, but I thought maybe we could spend just a little bit of time talking about what we might recommend for next steps. And Rashmi, I think you mentioned at one point when we were talking about this earlier, the whole notion of maybe meeting up with enrollment management at the right time when the cycle is over to talk about what went well. Can you just sort of talk about what your goal might be there if you were talking to a CIO and giving them recommendations for when to plug in and start this building of this partnership? What would you suggest?
That's such a great question. I would actually start the conversation and say, don't just limit your answers to technology ones. Just tell us in general what worked and didn't work, right? Because what may not come across as technology, what comes back to IT and sometimes when I was a CIO, was very curated. There was like a long string of other things that we could have helped that we didn't even know about. So the first thing I would do is have a conversation about what's your goal? What are the top 5 things. The prioritization was the first thing I had to do. Sit down and do like prioritize. What is your priorities? And that's XYZ. Then talking to my team about our priorities, and then bringing us both together to see where the conflict is. I think that is a great starting point. I always say just ask the leadership, can I have 10 minutes of your next departmental meeting? Go there, be present, engage, and say, hey, these are some of the things that are happening. We want to know how we can help you. You are so important, blah, blah, blah. But that is really going to be helpful. And the second thing is, if you are a CIO or you're part of the leadership and you're part of the cabinet, make sure you insist on being part of, in a nice way, of course. No one likes an obnoxious person, but insist on having that alignment conversation and saying, okay, what are your priorities? How is IT helping you? Actually, for us, we actually had to put it in a document. Our digital transformation document, actually, we also talk about how this is aligned to the recruitment priorities, how this is aligned to with key metrics. So I think it is important to show that joint accountability. So we know we are working on this together. It's not like 2 different teams with 2 different priorities, 2 different KPIs trying to figure this out. We are not competing there. We are going the same direction. So we should have some joint KPIs. So that's where I would start. And of course, a nice axe throwing in the mix is always good.
The team building activity we didn't know we needed,
Yeah.
but there it is.
Yeah, early in my career, I was involved in a paintball version of that, and
Yeah.
it didn't go so well for those of us that had never done it before.
That's the point. I think it's the point of seeing somebody as vulnerable is just as important as seeing somebody as an expert. And very often IT folks are not willing to come across as vulnerable. And that's a good starting point. Yeah, I'm often very okay with being the fool, right? I don't know. So yeah, otherwise I would not be in a fantasy football league. I have no idea what I'm doing.
So I think we're hearing lots of ideas about how to come together, but the whole idea is just come together to really start. So maybe coming in to talk to enrollment management, maybe not in the midst of the cycle when they're like the craziest, busiest that they're going to.
Now's a great time. Now's the time.
Aha,
September and
that's
October
great to
is the
know.
time.
So very opportune time for everybody. Check in with your enrollment management person. Find a time to sit down with them. Ask them how it went. What went well with the cycle? What did not? Where are they trying to go? How can you help? Right? And then start to set up periodic times that you're continuing to come together. I'm remembering Jackie saying something also, or maybe it was you, Rajmi, I can't remember who, but the whole idea as leaders, if we know this is important to us as an institution, maybe we also need to make sure that our teams know how important it is to us and to the
Absolutely.
institution, right? So that might be another thing that's really an opportunity for CIOs to be able to pass along how important this effort is and how important this partnership is.
Yeah, I start all my staff meetings with talking about enrollment management, even before I was in enrollment management. This is the dashboard. This is it. I think that is incredibly important, and developing some of the why. Why are we doing this? Tying that to financial, tying that with student success, tying that with student experience and centeredness. All those things are, I think, a great opportunity for us. It's a great point.
Yeah, Rashmi, I remember a conversation with an IT group at one point, and we stopped and just calculated if you lost that student in the funnel and they had have stayed for 4 or 5 years, what's the financial downstream implications from that?
Yeah,
And just one student, it's substantial.
it's substantial. Yeah.
And then what did they do? From a social mobility perspective, at my last institution, we were 66% transfer students and high on the social mobility
Wow.
area. And so if you lost them, it wasn't just a financial thing, it's what happened to them in their life.
Yeah.
If you stopped them out for some crazy reason because you had a process or a system that was very, very, very hard to navigate.
Exactly. And that's not always technology, but yes, there are a lot of systems in an institution that is not driven by student-centeredness. That's a great point. And student debt. These students are walking away
Right.
with debt and nothing to show for it until they come back and finish their degrees. So yeah, that's a lot of innovation has to happen there too.
Scoop them all back up. All right, well, this has been great. Really appreciate that all of you hung in there with us. I hope that you were able to get a lot out of this as well. This is our final webinar. We've really enjoyed being able to spend this time with you, and we thank Rajmi and Jackie so much for their time as part of all of this. And I want to turn it back over to
Very
Jason.
much so. Oh, I was going to
Thank
just
you.
say
Oh, go
right
ahead.
quick that Kathy and I will be at EDUCAUSE this year. So if
Yes.
anybody wants to look us up or further this conversation or talk about anything else, be sure to do so. Would love to see you.
I will be there too.
Great. Oh, I didn't want to speak for you, Rashmi. I wasn't sure if you were going. So that's good. It'll be all three of us. That's great.
And just for everyone to know, actually, this is the last of, meaning the part 4 of our 4-part series with Vantage. However, Vantage, we just can't quit you. We love partnering with you. So we actually have another presentation with them on September 30th at 12 p.m. If you want to register, I put that link in the chat there. As always, the recording and resources will be posted later today. And then if you don't mind and you haven't already, please pop open that Alchemer link there that I put into the chat and take advantage of our survey. We share those results directly with our presenters, as well as use it for our internal purposes. Thank you all so much. We're so glad to have you. I hope you have a great week. We'll see you
Thank
at our
you.
next event. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.